Greetings, everyone. My name is Ken Jones. I'm a coordinator for the War Industry Resistors Network, and you are here at our 42nd webinar. We've done this for over 3 years, pretty much a monthly basis. So this is number 42. And you can find the recordings of all of them on our website. I can post our website link there in the chat in a minute. And I'll just give you a heads up that we have a June webinar scheduled, well, penciled in. We don't have it confirmed yet. We don't have a link for you yet, but the presenter is a Palestinian human rights defender named Hisham Sharabati. He's based in Hebron. He's a co-founder and coordinator of the Hebron Defense Committee. So we're really honored and pleased that we're able to have him. Hopefully that will work out. And tonight we're super honored and pleased to have Dr. Rania Masri. She is from the artificially divided land of Greater Syria. Since 1993, Rania has organized for justice and against systems of oppression and wars through protests, teach-ins, conferences, political organizing, writings, media work, and nearly 2 decades of teaching holistic environmental sciences, including environmental justice at the university level. She recognizes the intersectionality of struggles and the need to stand in solidarity, not in charity. Rania joined North Carolina Environmental Justice Network in June 2022 as co-director and director of organizing and policy. She served as an expert in the Court of Conscience, where she presented testimony on the environmental impact of the 2006 Israeli war on Lebanon, and also served as a juror in the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal. Some of you may have seen her there. From 1997 to 2005, Rania also served as an elected national board member of Peace Action. So I'm very pleased to have Rania with us, and take it away, Rania.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I say this every time, and it's getting harder to say it. I must say that I really would rather be talking about something else rather than be talking about the horrors that are still being inflicted against our people. And today is the 594th day of the genocide. 594 days since the start of the televised genocide, and 77 years of direct ethnic cleansing on the historic lands of Palestine. And I must ask, the first question I must ask, particularly given what happened today, is whose faces reach the news in the United States? Whose deaths are considered newsworthy? And whose deaths are considered not even collateral damage? I mean, so much even less than collateral damage. In the last 24 hours alone, Israel has murdered more than 107 human beings in Gaza that we know of in the last 24 hours alone. I want to start by highlighting one of the children that was killed 6 days ago. Eye on Palestine tweeted 5 days ago that this father bid goodbye to his daughter, who was martyred while wearing the only clothes she likely owned, the same ones she wore when she struggled to fetch water, carrying it with her frail hands and a heart worn down by displacement long before war took her life. This is not simply a genocide on our children, but also a genocide on our fathers and our mothers. 2 days ago, a friend from Gaza wrote, and I quote, My family was forcefully displaced from one campground to the next with no food or supplies. Last night, my sister's tent was bombed while she and my family were sleeping. She woke up to her children's body parts scattered everywhere with loud screams and balls of fire forming around the refugee tents. This is a nightly occurrence for Palestinians. Since March 1st, with full bipartisan support, Israel has been inflicting, in addition to the bombardment, Israel has been inflicting a complete blockade. What did make the news last week was the release of this US citizen, a US citizen who graduated from high school and was so gleeful that he got on the first plane, went to the occupied lands of Palestine, and volunteered in the Israeli occupation army. He was released. Idan Alexander was released by Hamas resistance with the promise, the explicit promise from President Trump and his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, the specific promise that Trump would make a public call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, that Trump would work to achieve a permanent ceasefire, and that the blockade would be lifted. Immediately, not surprisingly, the United States broke the deal. And instead of a ceasefire, instead of the lifting of the blockade, more than 500 Palestinians were killed in just 8 days. And instead of the lifting of the blockade, we saw rather five trucks enter into Gaza. 2 of these trucks were loaded with shrouds in preparation for more mass killing. The 3 of the trucks that had barely any food had enough to amount to 30 grams of food per person, 4 rice crackers. And still that horror wasn't enough, because to add to all this horror, the moment those meager grams were unloaded from the trucks, the bombing began on the very Palestinians that were even trying to get these few grams. This morning, 100 trucks entered into Gaza, but the food has yet to be distributed because the humanitarian aid agencies in Gaza have deliberately been destroyed. What is needed right now are 41,000 trucks. 2 days ago, the United Nations declared that 14,000 babies in Gaza would die in the next 48 hours if aid does not reach them in time. And you may wonder, what is the relationship? Babies need mother's milk, and if they cannot have mother's milk, they need baby formula. And because their mothers are so malnourished, they could not provide mother's milk. And because of the Israeli blockade, again, supported by both political parties in the United States, baby formula is banned, cannot get in. That was 2 days ago that the UN declared that 14,000 Palestinian babies would die. Are we surprised by any of this horror? The Israeli leaders this past month promised us as much. Israel's finance minister said, and I quote, "The aid that will enter Gaza in the coming days is the tiniest amount. It allows the world to continue providing us with international protection." He went on and he said, "We are disassembling Gaza and leaving it as piles of rubble with total destruction, which has no precedent globally." These are his words, by the way. He went on and he said, "The world is not stopping us. We will annihilate everything that is left of Gaza." And today, just today, a senior Israeli lawmaker, the deputy speaker of the Knesset, specifically called for the women and children in Gaza to be separated from the men so that the men can be executed en masse. Not a misquote, an open call for further genocide from the very heart of the government. These are their statements. In the past 594 days, with clear evidence, the Israeli army has directly targeted children, sniping children twice above the waist. The Israeli army has used quadcopters to shoot injured children sprawled on the floor. The Israeli army has left infants to die and their bodies to decompose in hospitals back in December 2023. The Israeli army has destroyed the largest in vitro fertility clinic, killing 4,000 embryos. The Israeli army has kidnapped and tortured medical doctors. And in addition to that, that we know of, they have tortured to death 70 abducted Palestinians. The Israeli army has executed both Palestinian patients and Palestinian health workers with their hands zip-tied and thrown into mass graves. They have sexually assaulted detainees captured without charge or trial on camera. They have bombed safe routes where Palestinians were ordered to flee and then bombed safe zones where Palestinians were ordered to shelter. They have killed more journalists than in any conflict zone by specifically targeting them, 216 journalists. They have destroyed more than half of Gaza's desalination plants, undermining access to clean water. They have leveled all 4 major universities, attacked factories, libraries, bakeries, heritage sites, 247 mosques, 3 churches, and bulldozed 16 cemeteries. They have, according to their own soldiers' testimony, used bulldozers and explosives specifically to flatten Gaza. They have caused an estimated 4,000 Palestinian children to have at least one limb amputated. Amputations done without anesthetics or pain relief. Let us remember that 21% of households in Gaza before the genocide had at least one member of their household with a disability. Let us remember that child amputees need 8 to 12 reconstructive surgeries as they grow. They need new prosthetics every 6 to 8 months. They need access to ongoing rehabilitative care. And because of all this, the Israeli army has also bombed the only facility for prosthetics and rehabilitation services, and then they bombed the prosthetic limb warehouse of the Nasser Medical Complex. And as if this horror was not enough, the Israeli army is also playing piano music during the bombardment. Why? So that the Palestinians in Gaza who managed to survive will forever be associating the calm piano music with the destruction of their homes and their neighborhoods. The Israeli army has also used the sound of babies crying and people pleading for help to make people leave their homes so they can then shoot them further with the quadcopters. And yet today, a Republican congressman, Randy Fine from Florida, casually suggested that the United States or Israel should nuke Gaza and said in reference to Palestinians, and I quote, "There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture and it needs to be defeated." And I must ask, who is it who has a culture of hate? Whose culture is a culture of hate and of racism? Who is actually promoting evil here and whose culture should be defeated? Israeli doctors have compared killing Palestinians in Gaza to, quote, eliminating cockroaches. And Israeli television anchors have openly said that this is, quote, I'm quoting here, "This is not a genocide, this is a pesticide." And let us remember that during all this time, there have only been 150 Israelis that have refused to serve in the genocidal army. All this has led to 52,959 identified martyrs and 121,688 injured. 16,503 children known to be killed. And these numbers are vast underestimates, because if we take into consideration that the injured are likely to die, if we take into consideration those dying from lack of medications and chronic conditions, those dying from starvation, those presumed dead or missing or kidnapped under the rubble, those dying from disease, the number of martyrs is between 300,000 to 800,000. And none of this is surprising. They told us this earlier. In 2018, an Israeli political advisor insisted, and I quote, "We have to kill and kill and kill all day, every day." In 2004, a colonel said, and I quote, "We have to kill them all." And it started from the very inception of the Zionist state on the land of Palestine, from Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, who said, and I quote, "We must expel Arabs and take their place. We shall expand to the whole of Palestine," from their very first prime minister to the 11th prime minister, Ariel Sharon, who said, and I quote, "There is no Zionism, colonization, or Jewish state without the eviction of the Arabs and the expropriation of their lands." And of course, now the current prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is gleeful about the genocide, is openly attempting to execute a final solution. This violence serves a very clear purpose. Its purpose is to steal our land. And it is the very purpose of Zionism. And they use racist philosophies to justify that theft and that killing. And through these racist philosophies, they have empowered philosophies of disposability to such an extent that their racism has allowed for even more violence. And to me, what exemplifies this horror that is Zionism is the theft of Palestinian organs. For the past 30 years, it has been well documented that Israeli doctors have been harvesting Palestinian organs, stealing Palestinian body parts for transplantation, for research, for sale, and for profit. All the organs of a Palestinian body can be arranged at a cost of $2,500. Israel has the world's largest skin bank, but yet it has very few Israeli Jews actually donate. In 1996, an influential rabbi posed this question, and I'm quoting him here. He said, "If a Jew needs a liver, can you take the liver of an innocent non-Jew to save him?" He said, yes, that Jewish life has infinite value, that there is something infinitely more holy and unique about Jewish life than non-Jewish life. What kind of society is the United States funding and uplifting that allows such horror and that uses religion to allow such disposability of other people? There is not a crime that the Israeli state has not committed. There is not a crime that Zionism has not sanctioned. And this war machine, this racist, arrogant war machine continues to expand. The horrors that we are witnessing in Gaza have expanded as we speak into the occupied West Bank, into southern Syria that is now occupied by Israel, and into still southern Lebanon that is still occupied. Apartheid and genocide are simply on the same continuum. So then we got to ask ourselves, how are we in the United States, how are our lives connected from the United States to occupied Palestine? We know without a question that there are ties between our lives here in the United States as citizens and residents to the crimes committed against Palestinians. It is well known around the world, and it is well known even in Palestine. Ahmed al-Najjar, a Palestinian journalist in Khan Yunis in Gaza, says, and I quote, "We in Gaza are hungry, but we are no fools. We know that Israel can only starve and genocide us because the United States allows it to. We know that stopping the genocide is not among Washington's concerns. We know that we Palestinians are hostages, not just of Israel, but of the United States. We in the United States know that we are responsible. We in the United States know that we fund the war machine. And even if, according to the polls, half of Americans are supporting the funding of Israel, nevertheless, we are responsible. Israel bombs, and we invest through our cities, through our states, through our counties, through our pension funds. But that is not how our liberations are tied. I argue our liberations are tied, but the first question is, are we in the United States free? Are we oppressed? What is liberty? How would we define liberty? A basic definition is liberty is being free from oppressive restrictions. Liberty means you have freedom of speech and you have the right to privacy. Liberty means you have freedom from interference, from coercion or control. And liberty means you have the freedom to have the power and resources to fulfill your full potential. So I ask again, are we free in the United States of America? Or are we also entangled in systems that suppress and confine us? And are they those same systems that oppress and confine us here in the United States that are also shredding the bodies of men, women, and children in Gaza? In the United States, we are under the suppression of dissent and the manufacturing of consent. Truth is distorted and resistance is silenced. Manufacturing consent. Noam Chomsky made that term so popular, but we got to understand what it means. It means we are lied to. The weapons industry, and as a juror in the Merchants of Death Tribunal, I heard evidence of sociopathic crimes of the US weapons industry. I heard evidence of their influence, their lobbying, their purchasing of votes, their corporate takeover of this nation's foreign policy and this nation's mainstream media, all to generate ever greater profits. The weapons industry in this country has fabricated enemies to manufacture wars and then to sell us these wars through the media. Wars of choice. As the great Arundhati Roy said, once weapons were manufactured to fight wars, now wars are manufactured to sell weapons. False consent is manufactured not only through the media, where representatives from the military-industrial complex are 4 times as likely to be interviewed by the mainstream press as anyone else, but false consent is also manufactured in Hollywood, where there is evidence that the Pentagon and the Central Intelligence Agency have exercised direct editorial control over more than 2,000 films and television shows. And we must ask ourselves, those of us that live in the United States, if the New York Times lies about the genocide, what else are they lying about? What other truths are they denying us? If they are erasing the history, whose history are they also erasing? And all the while, of course, we are told that we must sacrifice our civil rights under the pretense of national security. We are fed that lie. And now, as more and more of us are uncovering the lies, the dissent is growing. And in response to the growth of the dissent, there has been an increased silencing of the dissent, an increased oppression against the dissent. We see this most predominantly through the marriage between the Israeli military, the US military, and US police departments, where I am proud to say and saddened to say at the same time that it is only in Durham, North Carolina. Durham, North Carolina is the only city in the country that prohibits its police from being trained by any military, foreign or domestic. That needs to be in every city across the country. Dissent is being silenced in this country, not only through police brutality, but also through increased surveillance, a marriage between IT, surveillance, and the war machine. They are attempting to silence dissent through the abduction of legal residents. And it is an abduction. It is a kidnapping because Mahmoud Khalil was arrested without a warrant. So it is a kidnapping. They are working to transform our universities into political institutions so that those who speak out are denied the very degree that they work to attain. And we know about Project Esther, which was formed during the Biden administration and lays out plans for surveillance, for silencing, for punishing anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-Palestinian activists, including the deportation of non-US citizens and perhaps eventually US citizens, the withholding of billions of dollars to universities for federal funding. We know this, we're seeing this. We know that they're also weaponizing anti-Semitism, which is extremely problematic and dangerous to the Jews themselves. There's even talk of them limiting citizenship, that now you cannot get a US citizenship unless you declare that you are not critical of the state of Israel. We know that there are 38 states in the United States that have enacted laws, executive orders, or resolutions to discourage or penalize boycotts against Israel, infringing and violating our First Amendment rights. And the US House of Representatives in Congress was going to vote on a bill that would make it punishable to even criticize Israel, to boycott Israel, to make it punishable through fines and jail time. 24 representatives in the House, Republicans and Democrats, were in support of that bill. In Texas, the governor's threatening to strip funding from the city of San Marcos because it passed an arms embargo resolution against Israel. California state representatives are trying to restrict ethnic studies curriculum to, quote, the domestic experience of marginalized people, to discourage teachers from teaching about Zionism and the Palestinian dispossession. You may have heard about the nonprofit killer that would have granted the White House the power to revoke the tax-exempt status of any nonprofit the executive branch deemed supportive of a so-called terrorist organization. They have been trying to sneak that nonprofit killer into bill after bill after bill. And now, and let us remember that the silencing of the dissent is not only domestic in the United States, it's also international, because we see it so clearly that now President Trump is faking a genocide in South Africa to punish and pressure the South African nation for their role. As human rights lawyer Craig Mkhiber said, and I quote, the sight of the US president who's actively helping to perpetrate an actual genocide in Palestine, sitting in the White House and shouting at the South African president about a non-existent genocide made up in dark web room chats by racist white supremacists still bitter about the end of political apartheid, and all because South Africa had the courage to bring Trump's Israeli collaborators to the World Court for its crimes. This is what we're witnessing right now. Being anti-genocide, being pro-human rights, being Palestinian, standing together is the canary in the coal mine in the United States. So then we wonder, is our liberation shared because the harm here is grounded in the same philosophy upon which Zionism is grounded? Yes, we have a shared liberation, whether in the United States or in the occupied lands of Palestine, southern Syria, and Lebanon, because we are grounded in the same philosophy. Tomorrow marks 187 years of the start of the Trail of Tears. On May 23rd, 1838, the US government began the forced removal of the Cherokee, the Muskogee, the Seminole, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and other Native American nations from their ancestral lands in what is now the states of Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, and Mississippi. They were forcibly removed to Oklahoma. The dispossession of the First Nation communities has not stopped. It has just taken new forms: broken treaties, land theft, resource extraction, kidnappings. That has taken new forms. It is ongoing. Imagine if this country, the United States, that was grounded in the same philosophy of Zionism, the philosophy of settler colonialism, acknowledges that history. Imagine this land, the United States, born out of settler colonialism and literally built on the bodies of enslaved peoples for over 2 centuries. A legacy that continues today through the exception in the 13th Amendment, which allows slavery as a punishment for a crime, enabling systems like convict leasing, mass incarceration, and prison labor. This land, built on settler colonialism and still being built on the bodies of the enslaved brown and black communities, this land where racist men are revered and held up, where racist men like Winston Churchill, who was granted an honorary US citizenship, said in 1937, and I'm quoting, "The Palestinians cannot be allowed to dictate the future of the country simply because they lived there for so long. I do not admit that right. I do not admit that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or the Black people of Australia by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, or at any rate, a more worldly wise race has come in and taken their place. In this country, men like Winston Churchill are still revered." So imagine with me for a second, just imagine, if we in the United States recognized that history, if we in the United States recognized that we are still forgiving that history, still erasing that history, if we in the United States gave more than lip service through land acknowledgements, Imagine if we in the United States actually worked for land back movement and for reparations. Imagine if we dismantled racism in all its forms in the United States. Imagine if we actually built a representative democracy in the United States. That is how our liberations are tied. Because so long as this country continues to be founded on the same philosophies of disposability and racism that allows and justified for the settler colonialism and the slavery upon which this country is built, then so long this country will continue to justify and forgive the philosophies of disposability that have allowed settler colonialism to continue in its vilest forms under Zionism. We have a choice today. Either we live free together with shared liberations, or in the United States, we acquiesce to the domination of others and the oppression of ourselves. And we in the United States then continue to live our lives as fragmented beings, compartmentalizing ourselves, living in contradiction to our principles, and medicating ourselves. Imagine with me if we dared to imagine. Imagine for a second if we dared to imagine what liberty would look like in the United States. Imagine if we actually, truly lived the very principles that we claim this country was built on. Imagine for a moment if we were more like Yemen, a country that has been impoverished and bombed, and yet abides by international law, by working to stop the genocide against Palestinians, by believing in equality. And believing in equality means that the people of Yemen recognize that their lives are not worth more than the lives of Palestinians, but rather that their lives are equal. Imagine if we believe that. Imagine if we believed in freedom, if we believed in equity, if we had the courage to imagine. And I say that because all too often I walk into spaces in the United States where we still cannot imagine a life free of capitalism, a life free of economic oppression, where we still cannot imagine a life free of injustice. We simply ask for less injustice, which is the very reason the Democrats continue to be where they are, moving more and more and more to the right, because we just want a little bit less injustice. I was asked one time to imagine a free Palestine. And I demanded of myself on a regular basis, I imagine my land free and my people free. And I want us to also imagine what kind of models that freedom would show. Palestine can show us the way. Despite it all, Palestinians are refusing to leave. They are holding on. Despite 77 years of escalating criminality, they are holding on to the belief in freedom. I remember the words of the Palestinian writer and researcher and my dear friend, Susan Abul Hawa, who said, and I quote, "Palestine will be free. She will be restored to her multi-religious, multi-ethnic, pluralistic glory. We will restore and expand the trains that run from Cairo to Gaza to Jerusalem, Haifa, Tripoli, Beirut, Damascus, Amman, Kuwait, Sana'a. We will put an end to the Zionist American war machine of domination, expansion, extraction, pollution, and looting." If Palestinians can still believe in that, what is our excuse in the United States? So what do? We stand with Palestine, which means we voice it, we scream it, we declare it in every single space that Palestine is the intersectional issue. It is the issue of environmental justice, of reproductive rights, of racist justice, of every kind of justice we are working with. Palestine should be in the center of the equation. It is local, it is regional, it is national, it is international. Palestine should be with us everywhere. That is how we stand for it. And we stand with it practically by divesting. We work to ensure that our cities, our universities, our counties are divested from war bonds, from any kind of investment in the war machine. And right now we work to break the siege. The Gaza flotilla is still ongoing. They're still trying. We support them either with our bodies or with our money or with our narrative. We recognize the root, and we do not shy away from saying that we are anti-Zionist. We do not shy away from saying that Israel does not have a right to exist, that no state has a right to exist. People have rights, not states, and most definitely not racist, apartheid, settler, colonial, expansionist states. They most definitely do not have a right to exist. We speak powerfully, and I will share with you in the chat a one-pager of how we should be speaking about Palestine. And we support each other, which means when one of us is hit, we stand together and we pull each other up. And fundamentally, and I got to say this again and again and again, we refuse crumbs. We refuse crumbs for ourselves and for Palestinians. Ultimately, we ask ourselves, what kind of world would we be living if we allow this impunity to continue? What further crimes will be done? The Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, said, Gaza is a rehearsal for the rest of the world. Dr. Azzeddin, a medical doctor in Gaza, is begging to us, ultimately, at the very least, and I quote, do not look away. To look away is to become part of it. To forget is to bury us before we are dead. And to remain silent is to drive the final nail. So let's stand together for liberty for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. That was powerful. That was comprehensive. That was passionate. I appreciate you so much. It's the truth. Thank you for the truth. Everybody take a breath, and we're going to take a minute or two. Paul Shannon, who's on our board of War Industry Resistors Network, is going to come on and have an ask for you in our audience. And then we're going to come back and we're going to have Q&A with Rania. And if you want to put your questions in the chat, I'll be happy to read them. We'll also do raising hands, and we'll do it that way. Let's take a break for a moment while Paul comes on and makes his request of all of us. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you very much, Ken. And I know we all want to get back to Rania and to go into some of these powerful points that she has made. Let me be brief, but hopefully clear. We had always hoped at War Industry Resistors Network that the webinars and these incredible speakers that we have would spark organizing efforts around the country, organizing efforts around our military industrial complex, around the companies that get us into wars and make money off wars. Last year was the best year ever for US war contractors. So we really want the webinars to spark action. The fact of the matter is that much action is organized on a local level, especially on Palestine. And this is great. But WIRN wants to become a part of that. And so even though we are a national project, we would like to we would like to give voice to some of the very exciting efforts to end genocide, to organize against Cop City, all these different areas where that we have touched on in our in our webinars to give voice to people in regional areas who are doing these things, to let others know about them in the hope that it will inspire others to recreate those types of projects where they live. And so we want to invite those of you who are now involved in important work, whether it's working on cutting the military budget, whether it's focusing on a particular war company in your community, especially those in all the war contractors, the reality is are providing weapons to Israel. There's none that are not. So if there's a war contractor in your community, it is connected to the genocide going on in Gaza right now. But we would like to invite you to contact Ken. He's going to put his email in the chat, and to let Ken know a little bit about what you're doing, and if you would be interested in presenting your project on a WIRN webinar. We'd ask you to do that. Hopefully you'll contact us soon, but think about this because there's so many exciting, courageous things going on in the country right now that we want others to know about, to feel connected to, and to be inspired by. The other very brief announcement I'll make is that we do want to train more people in how to run a webinar. The crew that we have here at Mass Peace Action that runs these webinars for War Industry Resistance Network is a little bit overburdened. And given the way the world is going, it would be great if more and more of us learned how to run these webinars, the technology. It turns out that it's not that complicated. And we do have people who are proficient at this, who are willing to conduct those types of workshops, willing to train you one-on-one on how to do this, so that you don't have to be running around looking for someone who knows how to run a webinar so that you can get your word out. So again, Ken has put his email in the chat. Please write it down. If you'd like to present a webinar, if you have an idea for one based on stuff that you are doing, not just doing webinars, but are actually organizing around, please get in touch with Ken. And if you personally would be interested in being trained on how to learn to do the technology behind these webinars, we welcome you to get in touch with us on that. So Ken, why don't we get back to the program now?
Good. Thanks a lot, Paul. That's great. Okay, so Rania, I see you already told somebody you would, with pleasure, give them some information about what to do. And so go, if you want to respond to that, please go ahead. You're muted.
Thank you all. And I've seen there's two questions. I'll answer them in the order in which they were given. Karen asked if we as U.S. citizens can bring a suit against U.S. weapons companies and our political leaders before the International Court for War Crimes. The United States is quite an exceptional country. And I say this just with the definition of exception. It regards itself as an exception. So we cannot bring suit before the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice due to jurisdiction issues. Because when the United States joined, they specified their exemption from jurisdiction. There are other ways to bring suit, and there have been other attempts through federal judges in the United States. Those have not worked well, through other aspects. And I would love if we could have a discussion where we can bring specifically the magnificent lawyer Huwaid Arraf and Noor Araiqat and other human rights lawyers who are experts in this and can talk about it in more detail. But it is fascinating to look at what are the treaties that the United States has signed and what are the exemptions. So unfortunately, that particular suit before the ICC would not work, but there are other legal aspects that can work. Shams, who is also a brilliant organizer in North Carolina, who does amazing labor organizing, has asked about divestment as a tool. And I've thrown in here the toolkit from the American Friends Service Committee. So there's several ways that we can look at divestment. One, well, let me specify what we mean by divestment. Divestment means you look and you see where the investments are. Does your city have investments in Israel, either through bonds? Because we know that over the past 10 years, Israel's credit rating has dramatically dropped. Thereby, the amount of investment the United States is putting into Israel has increased, even though as a financial investment, it's gotten to be worse because the credit rating has gone down. But the United States, through different investments and through particularly the US Congress, are the main financial backer of the Israeli economy. So we go in and we look at our cities, we look at our counties, we look at our universities, our churches. Churches are a big one, by the way, in the United States, to see where the money is invested. Now, since we have 34 states in the country that do not allow us to walk into our city council and say, you cannot be investing in Israel, that is, we cannot do in North Carolina, for example. We can, though, demand of our city and of our county and of all public monies not to be investing in anything that is a violation of human rights, which thereby would include weapons industries, and thereby would include companies such as Caterpillar that manufactures particular bulldozers to demolish Palestinian homes. They design them that way. So we could use that language, and the American Friends Service Committee, which is the toolkit that I put in the chat, allows us to use that language and thereby kind of subvert the language of the 34 states that prohibit us to do boycott and divestment through public monies. Now, in our churches, in our mosques, in our universities, we are not bound by that language. We could use either. We could either work for divestment from Israel, from weapons industries, from technologies also, by the way, that are benefiting the genocide, which in particular is Microsoft, not limited to Microsoft. So here we have more tools that are available to us, but divestment is a really, really big one. And through divestment, we can also be bringing Palestine closer to the climate justice movement, because Chevron, and in particular, but Chevron is not the only one here, Chevron is one of the main financiers of the genocide. And at the same time, Chevron is also one of those big, ugly fossil fuel companies that we also want divestment of via the climate justice movement. So the more we can think about these intersections, the better we can be both recognizing the intersectionality of Palestine to other issues and making divestment successful. So work it strategically and build it forward. The other divestment that is really critical is please learn from Durham, the city of Durham in North Carolina that managed to get that resolution passed through their city council. We have to be divesting our police from both the US military and the Israeli military. And we have to be more actively and strategically protecting our cities and our counties from cop cities that are being expanded and causing increased danger to all our communities.
Yeah, good. I see, I'm looking at the chat, Rania, and there's one from Grayson Traver. Says, what countries are most supportive of Palestinians? Why don't Russia and China do more?
The countries that have full democracy are the ones that are most supportive of Palestinians. I find that the Cuban government is one of the most supportive countries in the world, supportive of liberty and democracy and justice around the world. Cuba's number one. South Africa has been extremely supportive of Palestinians, and the magnificent Houthis in Yemen have been supportive of Palestinians. The question about why don't others do more goes back to how free are the others from the tentacles of global capitalism and from the US military war machine itself, and how much freedom do the other countries have? And I am positive, without a shred of doubt, that if there were real democracies in Western Europe, countries in Western Europe would not be funding the genocide. I mean, without a shred of doubt, I can say that. Also, of course, let us not forget Ireland. Ireland is not part of Western Europe. I consider Ireland to be like a people of color country, because Ireland is one of the few countries in Europe to have been occupied and to have liberated itself from occupation, and recognizes the strong relationship. I'd like to also look at your question in a different way, Grayson, which is, what can we in the United States do to encourage other support and to encourage more support for the liberation of Palestine? How can we strengthen our counties and our cities in the United States to be more supportive of Palestinians? How do we work to increase real democracy around the world? If there were democracy in the Arab region, by the way, the Arab armies would have gone in and liberated Palestine. But we have seen the deliberate built up of either dictatorships or monarchs or sectarian states in the Arab region, deliberately built up both by former colonizers, the French and the British, and fundamentally now by the United States and their lackeys, the small imperialist powers of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, much smaller, but also fulfilling the aim. So it is quite unfortunate that we do not have more democracies.
Yeah. So normally we've gotten into the chat questions. I don't see another one there, but normally what we do is go to people raise their hands. Like if you look at Paul Shannon, he's got his emoji for raising his hand up, and you can find that in the reaction button down below or wherever it is on your screen. So if you want to raise your hand, we'll take a few questions that way. And Paul, you've got your hand up, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, great. So I'm sure some people would rather ask the question themselves by raising their hand, so just encourage people to do that. I'll just mention on Rania mentioned the American Friends Service Committee. Not only do they provide resources for people who want to engage in divestment activities, but Noam Perry, who runs that program, along with Dov Baum, are willing to actually work with you on a micro level. If you're trying to get your town to divest from companies that are making weapons for Israel, they will meet with you and tell you how to do it and tell you how to get the information you need and give you the encouragement you need. So keep that in mind, that you would not be alone, that there are people out there who know how to do this and are willing to help you on it. But my question to Rania is of course, the European countries, some of them made this statement yesterday or a couple of days ago, calling for Israel to stop starving Palestinians to death. And I was actually kind of surprised they did, given their background, that they went that far. Now, of course, today they are being blamed for the killing of the 2 people in Washington, D.C. And it's quite unbelievable how upside down everything is. But could you tell us, is there any motion in Europe toward opposition by the states themselves toward Israel, or is this just window dressing?
It is political theater. It is real political theater done by countries in Western Europe. I mean, the United Kingdom is sending for the equivalent of $4 million in aid to Gaza. Could it be more insulting? While it continues to support Israel with weapons, they have suspended trade, but they haven't even thrown out the Israeli ambassador. I mean, they put a pause and they've said, pretty please, with a nice little ribbon. And it is complete political theater, complete political theater. And the countries of Western Europe, I would argue the vast majority of the countries around the world, unfortunately, but predominantly the countries of Western Europe and Canada and Australia and the United States are acting in violation to international law, because international law dictates that they have to work to prevent a genocide. And now there is no question that a genocide is occurring and has been occurring. And so they are bound by international law to intervene militarily. And all they talk about is the suspension of trade talks, not the suspension of trade, the suspension of trade talks. It is humiliating. It is offensive. It is political theater, likely in concert with the Israelis themselves. You know, Israel has shown like a picture of all these trucks to present the propaganda that, look, the trucks are getting in, but they're not. It's just a picture of the trucks at the border. And the bigger question should be, why is Israel controlling the border of Gaza to begin with? Why is Israel dictating what goes in and goes out of Gaza to begin with? Who would allow that? And we got to recognize that the blockade, which is now 18 years old, is illegal and criminal. So again, we see white West European countries and Canada, because let us not forget the Canadian governments and the United States, Democrat and Republican, and Australia, looking at international law as simply a tool to oppress and colonize the brown and black communities and ignoring it when it is in their interest to ignore it. In the same way that we have arbitrary laws in the United States that only apply against black and brown and are ignored by the white and the rich. So it is, unfortunately, Paul, political theater, you know, real political theater. Yeah. And we are talking about hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that are currently starving to death, that it has been more than a year with Palestinians eating grass, that now those that are injured do not even have the strength in their bodies to heal. And let us remember that there is no antibiotics in the hospitals. It is horror laid upon horror laid upon horror. And I see there's two people have their hands raised with questions, so I'll hand it back to Ken and Paul.
Yeah, let's see about our two people here with their hands raised. And let me just remind everyone that a comment is fine. We'd like a short comment if you have one, and then most definitely a question for Rania to respond to. And we'll go with Daniel Shea first. Go ahead, Daniel.
Unmute me. Okay. Yes, one thing I wanted to raise with you, and I really appreciate all you've said. I mean, the very idea that you said that states don't have a right to exist, people have a right to exist, I think is a very powerful statement, and I will be using that quite often. I'm with, of course, Veterans for Peace, and of course, we have taken strong positions for BDS. I wear a kippah when I'm up at the VA, where veterans don't support genocide. All of these issues, and I'm getting more and more people raising their hands and thumbs up to me when I do that. The thing that I'm also with the VOP labor group, and so I put in the chat that I think, when you said how do we reach more people in the U.S. to do stuff, is get labor unions, working class people to stand up and have their unions declare BDS and to declare their support for Palestine or Free Palestine. I think these are very important issues. We need more and more veterans out here speaking about it. We have Memorial Day weekend coming up. Veterans that are going to be speaking on those days need to raise the question because, like you said, Palestine is the intersection for all of these issues. I agree with that totally and completely. And one of the things that, we with the VFP labor group is we're saying, you need to bring back, the military budget. We need to cut it by $100 billion because that money's going to commit genocide. That money should be used for human needs right here in the United States. So that's one thing. The other is as I was driving home before this event from the VA. I just came from the VA. I was listening to NPR, and they were talking to a former ambassador from under Obama to Israel, and they start talking about how River to the Sea is anti-Semitic. Students in the universities are speaking out, are offending and poor Jewish students on campus. I'm with Jewish Voice for Peace, and I know most of us were out there supporting the students, as were Jewish students in supporting BDS and telling universities to divest. But blanket, this is anti-Semitism, and I think we need to reach the media because the media is silent. And so I think my recommendation right now would be not just a question, but we need to contact NPR and say, how dare you have the ambassador on there talking about this without having somebody from the opposition here, from Jewish Voice for Peace or from the Palestinian community to answer to this call, because that is just totally bullshit. And I just wanted to thank you. I'm sorry I don't really have a question.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd love to briefly respond. I think anyone who claims that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is anti-Semitic. They themselves are being anti-Semitic, because the idea that equality and liberty would be against Jewish principles, I think should be offensive to those who believe in Jewish principles. It's just very simple. You know, if the whole idea of equity and freedom and liberty is troubling, then there's a problem with that philosophy that the other person has. It's not my problem. If I cry out Black Lives Matter and I have people going, oh, that makes me uncomfortable, then I'm saying, well, then it's your racism that is the problem, not my cry for equity. And it's really interesting that they're crying that our words are being offensive to them, when their policies are truly shredding the bodies of our children. So it's just, it baffles my mind, and it is deeply upsetting. And it is also upsetting how they want us to be the perfect victims, and how they want us to only talk about our children. And that is why I constantly want to talk about our men, our glorious, glorious men who have been dehumanized and denigrated, and whose blood is seemed to be acceptable to spill. Our men, be they fighters or be they non-fighters, because it is the right of an occupied population to hold arms and to fight for their liberty. That is their legal, moral, and ethical right. I do want to say one thing about reaching the media, though. National Public Radio back in the 90s was better than it is today, and they were still pretty bad. So sure, vent, talk to NPR, but I think it has as much likelihood of shifting their minds as I have likelihood to shift any, MAGA blue or MAGA red. I think what we need to be doing is to recognize that there is an opportunity in these 10 years, because people have stepped away from traditional radio, and people have stepped away from news, and they have stepped away from newspapers. So people are not glued to Fox News and MSNBC. They're not reading the New York Times, and they're not listening to NPR. At least people under 30 are not, which means there is space for the building and the support of the alternative media, and particularly to fund independent news. So I would encourage everyone here, support Electronic Intifada, support Mondoweiss, support those networks, support Mint Press, support Breakthrough News, and follow their news. They are support Means TV. I mean, there are so many alternative, strong, ethical, equitable, leftist news services out there that we can be uplifting. And I would really recommend uplifting them. And I want to give a salute to Moji Agha. It is very true. Zionism itself is what is anti-Semitic. It is Zionism that is anti-Semitic. Oh, and I just got to say this. I am a Semite. As an Arab, we are Semite. So I also find it to be very problematic to consider, Arabs not as Semites, and problematic to equate a religion with an ethnicity. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam should be put together, and then we can look at ethnicities together, but not to equate the two. And my last thing is, please do look at the document that I shared in the chat that goes through the language that we need to be using and how to make sure that we decolonize our language very specifically, and use the words that are much more accurate and legal and ethical for the struggle. And thank you, Daniel.
That's great. That's great. It's a little after, we've been at it for a little over an hour right now. Let's take two more questions. We got two more hands raised, and then we'll call it an evening. And again, a comment and then a question, please. Elizabeth Atah, it looks
Yeah.
like.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you for your talk. You mentioned Russia and China. Now, I read that China had helped Palestinian families. So I just want to know something about that. And, are they continuing to do, what is their position exactly?
China has said a lot over the past week of threatening to intervene and support Palestinians. It is definitely more supportive than the Western imperialist, but it has not walked its talk. It has not walked its talk. China could be doing a lot more. So it's talking, but not really walking. It's talking more than most, but at this stage, we need countries to walk. And it is insane at the number of countries that still allow Israeli embassies to exist and have not, at the very least, expelled the Israeli ambassadors in their countries and canceled all trade and imposed sanctions and done what is their legal responsibility to do. And they have not done that.
Right. Thank you.
All right, last question. Stephanie, is it Sani? Go ahead.
It's Stefania. Thank you, Stefania Sani. Hello, and thank you to everybody. I live in Madison, Wisconsin. There's a lot of activity of opposition here. It's all good. But to me, there is the urge to do more and to put ourselves on the line. Just like you said right now, we need countries to walk the walk and to stop talking. And I feel that we, as taxpayers, need to do more too. So I wonder what suggestions you have to do more.
As taxpayers, the more that we can be resisting paying taxes to the U.S. war machine, the better. Some of us have the ability to do that. Others of us are tied within the system, and we have not been able to do that. I never thought I would reach a stage where I would say this, but our people are literally starving. So whatever financial support can also be given, and to be supporting small organizations, I will throw in here one of the organizations that I am in touch with that I support here in North Carolina that has a zero overhead, which means all the money that is donated goes directly to Gaza. It's called the One Body Initiative, and you can feel free. It's all the money goes direct. There's zero overhead. And then there is, of course, the Gaza Flotilla, which I am pulling up here. The contacts for the Gaza Flotilla, led by the brave and amazing Huwaida Arraf, who the woman is just stunning. I am trying to pull up. It is called the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, and I will pull up their Facebook. Here we go. So if any of you have the ability, and the physical means to get on those boats, then do get on those boats and try to literally break the siege. And thank you.
Okay, so let's call it an evening. But before we do, Rania, do you have, would you like to have some last words here?
I do want to acknowledge that these past 2 years have been the most difficult for us. And by us, I mean those of us from Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. I never thought it would be this horrific. I can't imagine. I mean, I've spent all my life fighting wars, and I feel like we're still stuck in them, and they continue and continue to get worse and worse and worse. So let us do all that we can and do what we think we cannot do. Let's push ourselves to do what we think we cannot do. And please, at the very least, make sure that in all your circles, I mean in every one of your circles, and where you work and your friends and all your clubs, that you make sure that the Palestinian liberation is central. I'm throwing my email into the chat. If anyone wants to reach out for anything, please let me know. And thank you again to WIRN and to Peace Action for organizing and hosting this webinar. Thank you, Ken, for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Rania. And hey, a shout out to Kathy Kelly, who actually put me in touch with Rania. So couldn't be more grateful to her and more grateful to you, Rania. And that's a great phrase. Let's do what we think we can't do or we're not capable of. Let's go beyond our limits. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. And let's keep on. Peace, everyone.